All right, a very big aloha. Welcome to grade 2 and 3. This is actually the second Zoom conversation with my mentor, Stephen Melillo, who is such an inspired musician. Something like ridiculous amount of like 1,250 pieces nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, symphonies galore. And I think like over 20 CDs. Is that correct? How many CDs do you have, Stephen?
Well, CD wise, there's over 40, maybe 44 CDs.
Wow, it's amazing.
Something like that, yeah.
Well, there probably should have been 2 or 3 CDs more with the grade 2 and 3, since it is such a huge work. And it is almost like a master class on life and death and spirit and how it all ties together in a magical way. And I listened to it in meditation, and I have now for, I guess, over a month. The first time I got the first release from you, I started. And I have found there's such depth there. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about you and the creative process behind this work that is like 30, is it 36 pieces on this, on the grade 2 and 3?
Yeah, the 36 tracks. Mm-hmm.
And it's quite an amazing journey. And through this journey, what I get about you is that you have a great understanding of life, death, the pain, and the resulting reward of getting through the pain. Sometimes you get that in this life, sometimes you get it after this life. But I sense that in your music a lot. So I guess my first question is, is your empathy, when you're creating these pieces, are you actually creating because you're going there, or is it taking you to where you want to go? Do you find that energy is just an expression of what you just went through or have gone through, or are you actually visiting these places in your spirit?
It's a great question. I think empathy is a good word. I use the word simpatico. So like if I'm guest conducting and I'm working with kids, well, what I'll always say is, say that a composer, or say that a guy writes a letter, and in the letter, he was hurt by this girl. And he writes a letter about how it's so difficult to go on now because the love of his life is gone, and this sort of emotional feeling. Now, a composer or the letter writer puts that into a mailbox, the mail is delivered to someone who now reads the letter. But the person reading the letter, let's say a conductor, has had a great life. They have never been hurt by someone that they love. They've never been left. So I always tell the kids, what are the odds, do you think, in your mind, of that music being properly recreated, right? So in the instance of a composer making music that he's going to play on the piano, or he's going to conduct himself, it's very easy to have both sides of the coin, because it's like a person writing a letter to himself. Oh, I've been there. And another way to look at it is, how can a person, it sounds like a Chinese, it reminds me of the martial art, because there's a saying in the Chinese Kung Fu, how can a caged man teach you to fly? Well, what I would ask kids is, can you write, do you think, really about being slapped in the face, unless you were slapped in the face? There's degrees of understanding, so people can come close to that, but to experience it is very different, and the result, what comes out of you, is different because of what you've experienced.
I think that's a very interesting answer. And I think possibly also our life experiences go beyond what we might even on the conscious level be aware of. I mean, there's things that we experience in our dreams that we may not experience in our life. And I believe in life after life after life, and possibly even that you might have experienced it when in another lifetime. And it could be the shadow of that might be even hanging over you at some point as well, And then I think of actors, who may not have experienced something, but I remember I loved music when I was young. I was like, I think I was 12, and I was given a class assignment to sing a song, and I chose Vise Darte. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And my mother said, "You can't sing that song." I said, "Well, why not? I love this song." She said, "You wouldn't understand that song. Come on, it's Vise Darte. It's just like you're tempting him." And I'm going, "Well, I just love the song, So, I mean, it's really interesting when something attracts you. And I think that spirit takes you. Many times I feel taken by your music to places where I'm recognizing that feeling. I'm recognizing, I was telling you how I love In the Valley of Heaven, because it feels like a place that I just love so much. I don't know how I feel like I've been there, but I listen to that music and I feel like, yeah, that's what it's like to be in the Valley of Heaven, you know? So I know music can take you places. And I guess it's partly also that spirit you feel I feel a lot of empathy in your music that I feel it's like, wow, you understand, I think this journey you've gone through, many of the pieces are about people you've met or stories of people that you've met that have influenced you. I know that's the case with a couple of the powerful stories that are brought through some of the people who had gone through World War II in prison camps. I know that with Catherine Geach, what she had gone through, and you seem to be able to be an interpreter for their soul's experience.
I like that word. I like the idea of being a conduit. Um, I think I may have shared this with you before, but it's the idea of being a documentarian. It's the idea of, like when I wrote that piece that I can't avoid always coming back to, because you mentioned have you lived before? When I was writing that piece that we might live, everybody asked me, why are you so connected to these men and why? And I said, I don't know. I just feel, I feel their suffering. I understand it. And I think that my job is to be the conveyor of that. So what I used to tell people was, yeah, I wrote this music in notes, but they wrote the music in blood. And that's the difference, So maybe if they could be composers, they would write what I was asked to write for them, because it really is that way.
I think that's a beautiful expression of it. I think that totally expresses it. And I'll take that to the next level, because you do a song called Were You There? It's wouldn't call it a gospel, but it's a traditional Christian song. At the time, Were You There at the Cross? And you do it in a very reflective, not the total symphonic energy behind it, but a kind of very reflective manner, almost like you're looking or there at the cross yourself. And I feel that energy when you play that.
What's interesting about why a person should do an arrangement is because they're trying to get you to experience something that you're habituated to and see it in a new way. So that happens a couple times on the grade 2 and 3, right? It happens with the lullaby piece. Like suddenly we're hearing the Brahms lullaby, but it's not really the Brahms lullaby. It's a father talking to his daughter who's overseas. So it's a very, very different thing. Were You There? That's a perfect example. I go to church, and so on Good Friday, they'll play, Were You There? And the audience, were you there? And it's sort of this very square and pedantic version of Were You There When They Crucified My Lord? And I always want, there's like a part of me that wants to like stop the audience and say, do you realize what you're saying? Were you there? Were you there when they crucified? And so now the motivation for arrangement, right, becomes this is how you might want to think of it from now on. So I've done that a bunch of times on the grade 2 and all over my life, right? Like I did my own version of the national anthem, which is very different, right? I mean, it starts like a love song and it ends like, I mean, I always tell people, even if you're a communist, you could stand up and salute at the end of that arrangement. And then I did an arrangement of God Bless America, which the veterans just see as the definitive version of what that piece should be, because they lived it. These people lived this. That's why I go back to that thing. I'm just writing in notes and rhythms, but they wrote in blood. They lived these things. Now, I don't want to, sell my part of the bargain short, because, like I said before, you have had to be slapped in the face yourself. So, whereas I was never a prisoner of the Japanese for 3.5 years, in this life anyway, I don't know. Yet I have lived enough things to understand that torment and to understand that agony. And, so before I wrote a note, Jack, the first guy I met from the Bataan Death March, he said to me, you can't do what you're setting out to do. It's impossible. No one can take what we lived through and put it in music. And then after the premiere of that piece, he took the pin of the regiment. I have it hanging over here. He took the pin of the regiment off of his lapel and he put it on me. And he said, from this day forward, you're my grandson.
Wow.
He goes, I don't know how you did it. He goes, but you took a mission impossible and made it possible. You conveyed what we went through. And I said, well, part of that is the nature of music, and a big part of it is the nature of God, because that's, God wanted your healing. And whereas he could have picked John Williams or Jerry Goldsmith, or, he could have picked some really famous person to do this for you, he picked little me. And little me is just like little you. I mean, how many people know your story? How many people have died with you, died with your brothers? How many? So, that's part of it. Me being in the obscure is part of the music. So it's all perfect. It's always perfect.
Well, then you mentioned the word agony, and immediately what triggered in my mind, which I haven't seen this movie in a long time, but it's the story of Michelangelo, played by Charlton Heston. You've probably seen it. The agony and the ecstasy. How he got so completely taken over by this project of doing the Sistine Chapel that he endured years of agony, blinding himself at times. Now we know that some of those things can actually blind you, really. And doing it on his back up above, I don't know how many hundreds of feet, a couple hundred feet in the air. And at times getting no money and getting, told he couldn't do it any longer. But I think the story conveys well that a great artist like Michelangelo, it's not like you have a choice, when you decide and something comes to you that you've got to convey the story. I think how huge what he was trying to convey on the ceiling of the system. Have you ever seen it, gone to Italy and seen that?
Yes.
It's amazing. I mean, you literally can just look up and, till your neck gets sore, and looking up and trying to follow everything. So again, that's how great art really happens. Something in you says, I have to do this. And then something else, once you say yes, takes over. And that's where spirit and the great ability of music and art come in to create masterpieces. That's what I really believe a masterpiece is. And I have to say, and I'm saying this because I really believe it, I think Grade 2, 3 is a masterpiece. It has such depth of a story that takes you, literally, I could probably listen to this for a year and hear something different. Like I said, I have different pieces I fall in love with. And then there's the whole story of how you tied in the stars, from Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, done in a way I've never heard it done before. The song means a lot to me because my bird used to sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. My parrot loved that. Was his favorite song. He passed away, but when I hear that, I think of him. From Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, to the sound of the stars, to the understanding of the planets and in the middle of this whole thing that you've gone through, here comes the vision of the stars and the song of the stars in the middle of the piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you
Yeah,
how did you mix that into the whole mix?
everything's connected. So yesterday I went to can you see it?
Yeah, was it the
The
eclipse of the
picture?
moon?
No, this one. So if you can see the
Yeah,
mouse,
yeah.
this one is the moon, right?
Mhm.
And check this out. I can't believe, I told the guy, I said, when you see this photograph, you're not going to believe it, because basically I can't take credit for it. I mean, it was an accident. I mean, I just had the right exposure with the right open lens. You know, I had a tripod, but that was Mars, and I
Mhm.
think it's Saturn, or like it was either last year or the year before, that there was like supposed to be like the star of the east, and they
Right.
looked like it, but see, when you see it that way, it's just two planets. When you
Look,
looked up with your naked
star of
eye,
wonder. It looked like the star that you only happen every few
right?
thousand years, right?
Yep. And so some of these things become score covers, like I,
Oh,
I take these pictures
wow.
of the moon, like, so this became like the score cover of a piece I wrote called the new beginning, which is I wrote for MIT. It's like a 5 or 6 movement, I forget, 5 or 6 movement work. And it was just one of the shots that I said, I just love that. That night I took all these pictures of the moon
Wow.
with this, and this is like,
That's
can you imagine? I
very
mean, that's
mystical.
how it looked.
Beautiful.
That's how it looked. Then
Wow.
the other day, I mean, you know about this. The other day we had the eclipse,
Yeah.
and I took that picture, and then I made that. Oh yeah, because that moon happens in the book Death and Moby Dick. So I did that. No, so you say that, the connection is, yeah, you were able to see the moon and all
Oh,
that
yeah.
on
Yeah.
on the screen. Okay, so I've always been, I've just always been attracted. I mean, I was a physics major. I think you know that. My first year of college, and I was going to study astronomy as part of my physics major.
Ah,
And I'm always like in love with the stars and that sort of thing. So it shows up in the music. It's just natural, I think, for it to do that.
well, I do think, we've had some conversations actually, because I love looking at the stars. I wake up very early in the morning, like I think you do, or you stay up maybe all night. But anyway, I get up very early in the
Both.
way before dawn, maybe sometimes 3 hours before dawn. And the first thing I do is I go outside and look up at the stars. And I mean, certain stars call to me. I feel their energy, and I go like, oh yeah, I see, and then I just stare at the star, and I let the stars speak to me, And we've talked about this, how that I really believe stars do have their own songs, their own melody. I believe the music of the spheres can be actually resonated through stars and through people. And so when you tune into that energy, it's like I feel like they even like being recognized. It's like, wow, okay, you know, let's share a conversation here. It's not in words. I don't ever get it in words, although you've seen I translate some of the words into words, but it's just the energy behind what I'm feeling when I'm looking at a star that I try to write about sometimes, which made me wonder about, of course, the Star of Bethlehem, the Star of Wonder, which some people think happened. Wow, I think there was like 70 days of a supernova that happened before Christ that actually was what I don't call them the wise men, I call them the masters. The masters followed that supernova to find the Bethlehem the star. But I mean, so stars can guide us and light can guide us. And I do feel when you get into that music that ties that in, again, you're going to that place of heaven. And that place of heaven is so, to me, hypnotizing and beautiful. But then again, I could just stay in those songs about the beauty and the heaven, but then you bring back Gethsemane and some of the pain that you have to go through in life as well. So I see in your music that feeling of heaven that is expressed beautifully, but also, and Deshaduto, of course, is the one that's kind of, for me, speaks. Deshaduto is like the one that speaks of the transition to heaven. But you also tie in what you go through on earth. And this morning, I couldn't help but going and realizing it's really one. I mean, I sometimes separate heaven and earth, but I always want to bring heaven to earth. And I'm going, you know what? You have to have the one to have the other here and now. You have to go through the pain to experience also the agony, to experience the ecstasy, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You're going to leave it there. You're just going to leave me hanging
Well,
there.
yeah, I mean,
I'm doing
you
it.
said it perfectly. There wasn't, there, it's not, you said it perfectly. So,
But you do it with your music perfectly. And so it speaks to me. I think,
well,
again, I mean, I'd love you to explain what you had to go through.
well, I don't, well, a huge key element in this is that that's not what I'm trying to do. If I wanted to contaminate the process of being pure with the music, remember that Beethoven said, and my mother used to say this too. This is what I think. My mother never knew that she actually was quoting Beethoven. It's really funny. But my mother would say, you can't make good food unless you have a pure heart, right? I've got that in her handwriting. And Beethoven actually said that. He said, you can't make a good soup unless you have a pure heart. Well, one of the quickest ways to convolute your heart is to sabotage it by, I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to accomplish that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to exert my will in order to do this. If I sat down right now and said, now I'm going to write a piece between heaven and hell, and I'm going to show the distinction between earth and heaven, I mean, nothing would put you farther away from earth and heaven.
Well,
because
I certainly agree with you, and I appreciate it, because there is this, at some point you do have to turn your will over to God's will, and you have to let spirit speak, and of course that was a piece I did in the hands of God. When spirit speaks, I listen. And ego will muddy up the waters really, really fast,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in everything, not just music,
Yeah,
right? In Chinese martial art, there's another perfect example, right? So, but there's a piece on the gray called Surrender. So there's a piece dedicated to the idea of this spiritual surrender. Now, I'm not talking about the physical surrender, right? So take Gandhi, right? So they put him in prison. That's not what I'm talking about. He never surrendered to them. Just because he's behind bars means nothing. So what I'm talking about is this idea of a purposeful divesting of oneself. So that's why I wrote the piece Surrender, right? Because when you give yourself over, now, over to what? I mean, I don't know. I mean, for me, I would say I give myself to God, right? I mean, somebody else might say I give myself to the universe. I give myself to the feeling of nature. I give myself, and whatever it is, that surrender to me is necessary in making good music, good soup, good food, because it keeps the heart pure.
Do you ever feel that a little bit of what people feel at the end of writing a major work like a book or other pieces, that when that's done, that there's a certain, I don't know if it's emptiness, that's not the word, but certain part of you is like,
that is the word.
Is that it?
That is the word. That's definitely the word. I took a class one time and I was the only male in the class. And it was a children's literature class, and there was all women in the class, and there's little me. And we were talking about Pinocchio. Uh-oh, get ready, because here comes like a big can of worms from Steve. So I say, of course Pinocchio came to life for, what's his name?
Giuseppe.
What's the guy's name?
Giuseppe,
whatever his name.
I think.
Of course Pinocchio came to life. I go, because men cannot have babies. And so the first reaction is, oh my God, did this guy just say this ridiculously sexist, chauvinistic thing, right? but actually I was really complimenting women.
Yeah.
And after I explained it to them, I said, do you realize you can actually have a life inside of you and you can give birth to that life? I go,
Yeah.
men are incapable of this, and so they make things to compensate for it, right? So Geppetto, he makes Pinocchio, and for him that comes alive. And for Michelangelo, he makes the statue of David, and for him the Sistine Chapel, for him that comes alive. And Beethoven makes the Fifth Symphony, and for him that's his child. It's the same thing. It's giving birth.
And I know the process because I've gone through it, and it's interesting. It's not the same every time. I mean, I've now done, I think, 11 CDs or 12 CDs, but you've done many, many more than that. But as I go through each one, I do actually call them my baby, my children for a while, because you do feel like you have to birth them. But each one is also like each child in a family is different.
Right.
Just because you have
That's
one.
right. So you come back. So to come back to your question, do you feel empty? Well, you already heard that, so the mother, when she finally has the baby, there's this, what do they call it? Postpartum or something like that?
Depression. Postpartum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally understand that. And I think I mentioned this in the last time we talked. The 36 tracks that are on the Gray and Gray 2 are pieces that came in between larger works. Like, for instance, I'll write the Concerto for Tuba. I'll write the 21-minute piece for Beethoven. I'll write these, expansive works. And for me, what has to happen after that, because I feel so drained and so emptied, is I have to come back, right? Recenter and, kung fu, right? It's like go back to the center and say something really quiet about what's happening right now in this moment of having divested oneself. See, it's that yin and yang cycle, right? So you're pouring out, and then you have to open your heart and listen, and then you're going to pour your heart out again, and then, because it's not just one thing. I mean a piece of music, and then all the pieces of music you write are not one trajectory.
No.
Everything is a spiral.
Mm-hmm.
It's expanding, but
Yeah.
there's a constant coming back. You're always coming back. You're always coming back. And I think that's what happens in the Gray 2 and 3. It's about coming back and recognizing all the things that I wanted to share with people, right? So what do I really want to share with people is, I know what it's like to look up and see gray and not see that sunrise and not see that sunset and not see the stars, and not, right before you said the stars guide us. Well, ask any old school navigator. You better believe the stars guide, right? The sextant, Magellan. This is all part of our what Carl Jung would call that archetypal, subconscious, the collective unconscious. And, we are alive together, and we look at these things, and there's mystery, right? There's mystery. There's that gray. And so what I wanted to do was assure people that beyond that gray, the stars are still there. The sun is still rising. There are rainbows somewhere on the earth. And even if in your moment you are lonely and you feel hurt, no, take some strength from this. Go to the valley of heaven and see that sun come up there. If you can't do it here, see it in your mind there. So it's pretty simple.
Beautifully describes it. It's kind of what I got in meditation after listening to the Valley of Heaven, and also feeling that you have to love the gray for what it does. Even remembering is the word that came to me, remembering that light, even in the gray, and being able to love the gray, even in the light. which is a beautiful gift. And I don't know if I could add more to it right now. I mean, we probably could talk for another 2 hours because I love talking, but I think I'll leave it on a high note there. And which note would that be? High G, A, maybe A?
That's going to be C at the top of the piano.
Okay, see, okay, we'll leave it on the high top of the piano. The light beyond the gray. I thank you so much, Stephen. I really honor you, and I encourage everyone to go to your site. The site is?
Well, my website is stormworld.com, and I've been posting like here now links, you know, where the gray is, and the Dwegon score, and the Christmas Passion CD. But the best thing to do, I think, go to stormworld.com/storm gifts, because I have a bunch of stuff there. I have, like, you know, Christmas that's appropriate for our time, Christmas and the holy days, right? So you have the Christmas Passion, there's the Dwegon score, there's the gray 2 and 3, and then there's the novels, right, that are strangely prophetic. I mean, I wrote them before the pandemic, and anybody who reads those will just freak. I mean, because it mentions pandemic as part of the novel. It's just interesting stuff. I think it's just being, you know, the surrender thing. I think that's a big part of it.
Well, I thank you so much for all your wonderful gifts to the world. Of course, people can go to, if they can't remember all the other stuff, they could always go to Amazon or any of the streaming sites as well that they use. There's so many now. But it's a wonderful gift for the holidays. And it's a gift that will keep on giving. A lot of music these days, in my opinion, are kind of written like as a one-off, and you listen to it and you might listen to it for a week or two, and then it's like over and done. But not this. This is a lifetime. This is a lifetime of listening in the storm, in your works in grade 2 and 3, and in all your pieces. So I thank you for your gift and the way you share it with everyone in the world. It's really a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for people to understand things they may have wanted to understand but didn't have a way to put it into context. You do it for them. So thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Aloha.